Warlord, Saga of the Storm, Into the Accord Lands. Story number 12, The Ballad of the Bear and His Merry Men, by Westley A. Youngren. My lover was pale and slender, her two left hands befell me tender, but once those lords had seen her power, they locked her away in some abandoned tower. "Shut up already, and stops with them stinkin' love songs," shouted a Nothrog who had drunk one too many meads. "We've had enough of your smoozy songs. Tell us a story of battle." "A story of battle, eh? Of heroism? A legendary tale to inspire awe in all who hear?" "I swear, human, get on with it or else." "One must never rush a good story," the bard retorted, half joking, half annoyed. The bard cleared his throat, turned his lute, stood on the nearest table, and proclaimed with the confidence of a lion, "Prepare yourself, fellow tavern mates, as I regale you with the ballad of the Bear and His Merry Men. There once was a hero that roamed the land, hidden deep within the trees, a fierce and mighty bear named Huggins the Grand, a mighty champion of the free, a lovable warrior welcomed throughout our towns, and anywhere else that freedom could be. The bear and his merry men often traveled the king's trail, a group of misfits, protectors of the weak. Some were hairy with bushy tails, other were birds with no hope of flight, and one slippery, small like the snails, and together they roamed, never fleeing a fight. But then there was that fated day when the red hue of violence filled the sky, and for their mischief they would finally pay. Sadly it seemed, our merry group of misfits were destined to die. For Huggins and his merry men were roaming the land when they came along the one who would take Huggins's eye. While traveling to town, our heroes spotted something dastardly quite near, a band of Nothrogs looking vicious and wild, with a plan to attack a village and slaughter all, both adult and child. And on this day, like many before, the bear in his own acted with no fear. They leapt into action as if springing a snare. The otter devised an ingenious plan. They'd all work together and destroy this wretched caravan. The one like a snail vanished out of sight. The fox unleashed a flurry of arrows with all his might. The rain of arrows provided cover fire, while the flightless bird charged into battle with no care in sight, all ferocious in battle like swords for hire. But just as victory was at hand, a loud and formidable boom shook the land. The bard paused for dramatic effect. He slowly began to strum louder and louder to build suspense. The bard roared into the next verse. Out emerged a warlord so terrifying that none dared a glance. Before them stood the war boss Azkal, the mighty and fearsome destroyer of all, a foe so mighty that none stood a chance. He took in the moment and began to advance. He clubbed the bird with one mighty swing, like a master swordsman in some frenzied dance. Azkal slew the slug with his blade's sting. Then Fox and the otter pounced from their hiding, but Azkal would not be tricked by such roguish things. All looked lost, but this was the time when Huggins emerged with a legendary line. "You have my brothers, you foul beast. I ask you to leave, for if you stay here on my claws you shall feast." Azkal just smirked and boastfully said, "A hero you may be, but I will soon have your head." The battle ensued with chaos throughout. Back and forth those mighty giants laid one another out. At times it looked like our hero would win, but then Azkal caught Huggins on his furry chin. As hairy old Huggins began to sway, the great war boss lifted up the poor bear and had his way. In a ferocious demonstration of his terrible might, he swung the bear into the nearest tree, and then snapped poor Huggins's back over his knee. Now Azkal was dreadful, but honorable was he. He leaned over Huggins and began to say, "You fought well, but I broke you on my knee. I will take your eye for sport, nay, as a lesson to be learned. This world is not for the free, but to be conquered by those powerful like me. If ever you want to challenge again, I'll be waiting," he said with a grimacing grin. The bard paused again to let the crowd simmer in a sense of loss and dread. And just like that, the battle was over. Our heroes had bled. They had been left hobbled and defeated, and Azkal would continue his campaign of war and bloodshed. But let's not forget that this day death was cheated, for although the bear and his mighty men were beaten, they looked to the sky and vowed their revenge. They would heal their wounds, but never retreat. And one day, when luck plays her tune, again the great war boss they would meet, under the glow of old Iskar's moon. So don't worry, folks, all is not lost, for our heroes still stand and roam the king's land. With this final chord, the crowd erupted into cheers. Amongst the cheers, the Nothrog heckler slipped out unseen as she had to tell her boss of this tale, for Azkal would need to put a brutal stop to any notion of resistance. But Azkal would never hear her report, for as she traveled through the woods that night, she would meet the old Huggins and his merry men, and never hear or tell a story again. Thank you for listening. Please check back soon for story number 13, Nature's Wrath, by Russell Franz.